Hey guys, welcome in this video. I hope that all of you are doing right. So in this video, we will talk about what are the best markets to trade and to get consistent results, right? So I think that this is a very important topic. This is one of you guys that actually asked me to record a video on this topic. So I thought of why not doing it. I thought that it was a pretty good idea. And it's actually something that is really important because if you select a market that is just less consistent with the result that it can produce, then it's just going to be more difficult, right? So I think that selecting the right markets for the right reasons is something that is actually quite important, all right? So this is what we will talk about in this video. So just before that we start, as always, guys, please feel free to drop a like. I would really appreciate it. And as always, make sure you are subscribed to the channel. These two things really help me just grow the channel even more and just help as many people as possible, which is my goal, right, with these videos. So if you like my content, if you think that there is value inside of that, right, well, please do this and I would really appreciate it. So let's get into the video, all right? What are the best markets to trade in order to get consistent results, right? Now, personally, there are three markets that I trade specifically. And as I said, there are very important reasons of why do I only trade three markets, right? So when we say markets, right, just to be clear, we can talk about the stock market, we can talk about Forex, commodities, cryptos, etc., right? And so between all of these possibilities, there are three markets that I focus on. And so the idea, right, that you guys have to understand first of all when it comes to choosing a market is that if you want to trade like I do, right? If you want to use a similar system with fundamental analysis and technical analysis, which I believe is the best, right? I've been trading for 7 years and I've been, testing different things on and off, right? And overall, right, this is really what has given me the best results and the highest consistency, which is really the goal at the end of the day, right? So if you want to use fundamental analysis, so looking at the macro economy and technical analysis and merge them together, right? That is exactly how I trade. I've talked about that multiple times. Well, there are essentially, right, some markets that will be easier to actually apply this concept more than others, right? Now, it doesn't mean that they are bad markets and that you cannot trade other markets than the ones that I'm going to explain, but it just means that in terms of probabilities, I think that it's slightly lower in terms of the results that you could get on these markets, right? Now, the first market that I trade is simply the stock market indexes, right? So the S&P, the NASDAQ, the Dow Jones, and even indexes from other countries, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be just in the US, but the US is always the main place, and this is where I base my thinking for the other markets, essentially. And so the reason why that is a pretty good market to trade is simply because if you look at any stock market indexes over the very, very long term, you will see that they are in a very strong uptrend, and it makes sense simply because the economy overall is growing. And so trading these markets, especially on the long side, so buying the market right over a medium to long-term horizon, when you have, let's say, a breakout with some good fundamentals, that is a really, really good way of going about it. It gives you pretty high probability of actually getting a good trade. And it's not that complex to do. You just need to understand how to actually do your fundamental analysis and how to time a trade properly with technicals using breakout techniques and stuff like that, right? But overall, it's really not that complex, and it gives you a pretty high probability of success simply because, well, overall you are riding the long-term trend, and so while you trade in this direction, it just gives you better results, right? Now, it doesn't mean that you could never bet on the downside for the stock market, but it just means that over the long term it's just less probable. So it's not something that you cannot do, it's just something that you have to be aware of, and that overall, right, it's it tends to be better, right, than going long than going short on stock market indexes. But that's really the first market that I trade. And the reason why I like to trade this market is simply because it's quite easy, I would say, to have a good fundamental idea and to time it with technicals, because as I said, the corrections tend to be quite clear. They tend to be quite similar as well throughout history, right, if you study a bit the chart. And overall, the breakouts are really not that hard to get. And since there is this kind of natural upside movement on the market, well, it really increases the probability. So this is really a market that is pretty good to trade, in my opinion. This is one that I've made quite a lot of money right over time with this. Now, after that, the second market that I think that is very valuable is simply the Forex market, right? So trading currencies. Now, this is the market that I started with. So this is the market that I have the biggest amount of experience, right? I've been trading this market literally since day one. And the reason why I like to trade currencies is simply because sometimes you will have fundamental situations that are simply easier to trade through currencies and to essentially contextualize an idea, right? Because the way that I trade is exactly what I just explained. You have a fundamental idea and the goal is to contextualize this idea through your technical analysis, right? And so by trading currencies, one of the most interesting point about that, right, is simply that this is such a big market, right? The Forex market is a much bigger market than the stock market, for example, right? And so it's very, very interesting. And the reason why is because even when you have a very strong and a very good fundamental idea, right, it takes time for the market to develop and to price in this idea, simply because it's such a large market with many buyers and many sellers at every single price that it takes more time to actually run and to develop in one direction. And so it gives you enough time to actually properly structure a trade, look for good entries and stuff like that, right? So the Forex market is a really, really good market to trade. And it also, as I said, is easier sometimes to represent a fundamental situation through currencies than it is for other markets. So that would be the second market that I like to trade and that I think is really good. And then the third market that I trade are commodities, okay? So for example, gold, oil, corn, wheat, soybean, and stuff like that, right? So really commodities in themselves. And the reason why I like to trade these markets is, again, simply because in terms of fundamentals, it's not that hard to, understand a fundamental situation when it comes to these commodities. And then what is really cool is that once you trade them, let's say with a trend following approach, which is what I do, right? I just try to ride the trend and I just try to stay in the move as long as it's, making money, right? Essentially. Well, what is cool about this market is that sometimes when these commodities start to trend and they really start to make a big move, these moves, right, they really tend to get big, especially at the end. And sometimes, you get a massive spike to the upside and the risk reward ratios on these trades are just completely enormous, right? So this is very, very interesting because once in a while, right, not often, right, I don't always trade this market. Sometimes nothing is happening and there are really no good opportunities. Sometimes it's amazing, right? So it's more black and white in terms of this markets, but once there are great opportunities, right, it's a really, really good one and it offers amazing opportunities. So these are really the three markets that I trade the most. And as I said, the reason why I trade these markets is mainly, right, if we try to just summarize everything, that it's easier to take a fundamental idea and to represent this idea on these markets and to actually time these trades, right? And this is what I've found over time to just give me the best results possible, right? Now, just to be clear, can you trade cryptos? Can you trade individual stocks and stuff like that? The answer is yes, okay? There's absolutely no problem. You can trade these markets using the same system that I do, right? Inside of our coaching program, we have many students who trade these markets, right? And they still have good results and there's no problem with that, right? So it doesn't mean that you cannot trade these markets. Sometimes trading these markets will give you even higher risk reward ratios. So it could be interesting. The only thing that is slightly different, right, is simply that when it comes to individual stocks, for example, if you trade these stocks, you expose yourself to a potential loss that has nothing to do with the macro stuff, but more the company in itself that you are trading the stock with, right? And so the problem here is simply that sometimes, right, once in a while, you will probably take a loss and your overall analysis would be good, right? Everything would be fine in terms of fundamentals and technicals, but let's say that they have a bad quarter, right? And the results are disappointing. So the market goes down, right? And you take a loss that is a bit unnecessary because the overall market is still doing fine. So that's, let's say, the downside of trading individual stocks. But as I said, the flip side is that you get higher risk reward ratios sometimes. So that could be interesting still. And in terms of cryptos, right? Well, it kind of reminds me a bit of commodities, right? So sometimes you get these massive bull markets where you get insane return on investments. And so that could be really interesting to trade, right? I have a lot of students who've made a lot of money trading these bull markets on cryptos. So that is very interesting, but it's a tradable market, right? It's not really for me an investment, or at least that's now how I consider it. And the reason why, simply because it goes up a lot, but it also goes down a lot. So in terms of consistency, it's harder to maintain with a market like this, right? So for me, it's more a tradable market that when it starts to run, you get in, you ride the move, but when it starts to crash and come back down, you just get out, right? Essentially, that's how I work, right? And that's how I would do it if I was trading cryptos, and that's how a lot of our students, as I said, are doing it. And it works very, very well. But just like commodities, it's a market that once in a while could be interesting to trade, right? But I don't think that it's really something to always be involved in. Again, just like commodities, right? There are better periods than others, so you need to filter through this, right? And so that's the reason why I also like to trade Forex and indexes, simply because there are very often opportunities on these markets, right? To position yourself in different ways. And so overall, if you work on these different markets, it gives you a better just management possible in terms of your portfolio, in terms of your position. It gives you a better diversification, and it increases your probability of just getting consistent results, right? So that essentially is the answer to the question. Now, I don't think that there is a market that is necessarily easier to trade than another. They all have their complexity, they all have their nuances, right? And so what I think is important is simply that you understand all of them in order to develop a good overall understanding, and that no matter what happened in terms of fundamentals and in terms of the macroeconomy and stuff like that, that you find ways to actually contextualize this idea through different markets, and that you are able to capitalize on these opportunities, right? A lot of people sometimes at the beginning make the mistake of like, let's just focus on one market, right? Focus on one thing and just do this alone and forget about the rest. And it's not necessarily bad, but I don't think that it gives you a lot of perspective. And I think that at some point, right, you will miss just general knowledge about the markets, right? And just it's going to limit you with how you form your ideas, right? So I think it's more interesting to work on different markets. That is what I teach to people inside of the program, right? I think it's just a better approach. That is how I work. And this is really what has given me the most amount of consistency, because as I said, at the beginning, I was only trading Forex. And then at some point I started to trade other markets, and my results just kept on getting better, right? When I started to do this. So essentially that's the idea. So I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. I hope that I was able to explain my ideas clearly and bring you some value. If you have questions, or if you have ideas, right, of potential videos that I could do as well on my YouTube channel, please drop them in the comment down below, and that will be a pleasure to just answer you, right, and maybe even do a video, right, if I like the idea. So again, guys, please leave a like under the video. I would really appreciate it. Make sure that you share it around as well. And on that, take care, trade with care, manage your money well, and I will see you in my next video. Bye bye.